Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be with you. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. My name is Dalia Mogahed, and I'm the Director of Research at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. I'm very excited to share with you the information that we have today. From mosque opposition on a local level to presidential candidates calling for surveillance of American mosques, so often Muslim houses of worship are discussed as risks to be mitigated rather than vibrant centers of American faith life. But today we're doing something very different because we're taking a step back and cutting through the misinformation to bring you the facts. The US Mosque Survey, the only study of its kind, documents the growth and development of American mosques, providing a national portrait of Sunni and Shia houses of worship. The purpose of the US Mosque Survey is to provide a scientific and detailed portrait of the American mosque in order to dispel misconceptions and to help mosque leaders around the country, as well as participants, better understand their mosque and hopefully work to build and improve it. All of the US Mosque surveys, which started actually in 2000, a full 20 years ago, and they're done every 10 years, 2000, 2010, and then this last year, 2020, were conducted in collaboration with a larger study of American congregations called Faith Communities Today, or FACT, which is a project of the Cooperative Congregational Studies Partnership, a multi-faith coalition of numerous denominations and faith groups, headquartered at Hartford Seminary. The primary sponsors of today's study included many organizations. Among them was the Islamic Society of North America, ISNA, the Center on Muslim Philanthropy, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, and the Association of Statisticians of American Religious Bodies. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our primary investigator on this study, Dr. Ihsan Bagby. He is an associate professor in the Department of Islamic Studies at the University of Kentucky, whose research focuses on Muslims in America. In 2001, he published the results of the very first comprehensive study of mosques in America entitled The Mosque in America, A National Portrait. Based on the 2001 study, Dr. Bagby published a series of articles diving deeper into the data. He also served as the primary investigator on ISPU's Reimagining Muslim Spaces project, which we encourage you to check out. Dr. Bagby received his PhD in Near Eastern Studies from the University of Michigan with a specialty in Islamic law. So I will turn it over to Dr. Bagby to present the results of the study.
Thank you very much, Dalia, and thank all of our participants, our panelists today. And let me get right into the results of the study and my reflections on them. And I will try to focus on just a few things, but first let me just give a background. Okay. And that is that, as Dalia mentioned already, this is a comprehensive study. We try to chart as many aspects of mosque life as we can. It's a statistical study, and we have been doing it every decade since 2000. And our purpose is first and fundamentally to help mosques grow, to become stronger, to improve their performance. So this is to try to give a better understanding to Muslims so that they might work to improve their mosque. But secondarily, the purpose is to try to provide accurate information to the general public and to the media to ultimately dispel misconceptions. we're going to talk about the first report. There's actually going to be a second report. The first report, which we will talk about today, really focuses on basic numbers, essential statistics. The second report focuses more on perceptions, attitudes, and also mosque activities, and in particular women in the mosque, which we've charted through the decades. I don't know why it won't move. Okay. Again, thanks to our survey partners, ISNA, Center for Muslim Philanthropy, Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. This project would not have been possible without their support. And then, as Dalia mentioned, FACT, or Faith Communities Today, has been a collaborator in this effort. We've cooperated and benefited greatly from our association with the FACT program, led by Hartford Seminary, and Scott Thumma is here representing them. And special thanks to our research committee, Dalia, Riyadh, Zahid Bukhari from ISNA, Bashir Muhammad from Pew, Sharik Siddiqui from Indiana University and the Center on Muslim Philanthropy, and their Scott Thumma. Basic understanding of methodology. First, we did a count of every mosque, and we spent months trying to identify and confirm every mosque in America, and our count was 2,769 mosques. Now, based on that universe, then we sampled, which means that we chose on a random basis a certain amount of these mosques to be part of the actual survey. And we stratified it also by state. We completed 470 questionnaires, which met our gold standard of a margin of error of plus or minus 4%, actually a little better than 5%, it's actually 4%. And just for your information, the results are pre-COVID. And let's not talk about methodology, let's get right into some of the findings that I feel are worthy of taking note of. And I think the basic headline here, the main point I think that we can take from this report, one, is a very positive one. Mosques are growing. Mosques are healthy. And I think we should be very proud. Muslims should be very proud of the successes that they have had. Starting in the 60s, 70s, into the 80s, Muslims were praying in little rooms, in garages and living rooms. And since that time, we have seen what I think can be described as spectacular growth and building. So, you know, sometimes we can look at a glass half empty, but this is clearly a report that says our glass is very full. We should be very proud of what has been achieved, and thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and thanks to the pioneers that have led this growth. So the number of mosques continues to grow. I mentioned we have counted 2,769, and the graph shows you how steep the increases have been over the decades. And the main driving force is immigration. I think we can all agree on that. And one of the reasons why growth is expected to continue into the next decades, because America is a very attractive place for Muslim immigration. And the proportion or the number of purpose-built mosques continues to increase. So if you look at the graph, looking at the more brownish color there on the top, which is the 2020 results, you see 37% of all mosques are purpose-built, and that's a steady increase from 2010 and 2000. And if you look at on the left again, in terms of actual number, this is an increase from a little over 1,000 mosques in 2020, from 632 in 2010. So spectacular growth for the most part. However, looking at the graph, you see that still half of mosques are rented. So, or purchased, purchased. And so you can imagine that as time goes on, there will be pressure, there will be efforts to build more and more mosques. And it is expected that that will continue. So we're still in a building boom for the most part. And another statistic which shows the expansion and growth is that about 2/3 of all mosques moved to their present location in the past 20 years, which means that for one thing, mosques are young, and we are a young community, but also it shows the continuation of growth and expansion that is still taking place and will undoubtedly continue to take place. One footnote of all of this is that in 2020, we charted that the number of mosques in the inner city, in downtown areas, in large cities has decreased. So if you look at the graph, the far left, you see the kind of orange 17%, but the green 2020 just 6%. And then look to the far right, we also saw a steep decrease in the number of mosques in small towns, small cities. Again, to the far right, the orange 20% in 2010, down to 6% in 2020. Interesting phenomena going on. Also, a sign of the growth is the continual increase in the average Juma size. So we are now up to an average Juma attendance of 410, and you can see the graph of the steady increase that has taken place. But let me point to a few issues of concern. And the one surprising statistic that came out of this study was the fact that the proportion and actual number of African-American mosques has declined since 2010. So again, looking at the graph, the top level, 2020, African-American mosques are the orange color. So you see that that orange color, 13% of all mosques are considered African-American. In other words, African-Americans are the predominant group that attend that particular mosque. That's the definition basically of an African-American mosque as opposed to a South Asian or Arab mosque. So if you look down to the second, in 2010, African-American mosques were 23% of all mosques. In 2000, 27% were African-American of all the mosques. So for me, this is a surprising phenomena. And why? And I really think this deserves more study. I did try to backtrack and look at the 2000 mosque, And I did get a sense of a little sense of what was going on. And what's clear is that conversions have stagnated. And of course, conversions are the lifeblood of the African-American community. How does the African-American community grow in number? And that is basically through conversion. So when conversions are not growing, then African-American mosques are not growing. The second point that I charted by looking at 2010 statistics is that most of the African-American mosques that have closed are small mosques, either in small towns or small mosques in city areas. But basically, it seems as if the lack of conversion, the growing age of the leadership of the mosque and attendees of mosques, small mosques have kind of lost the spirit and the drive to keep open. The third point that might be mentioned is simply a statistical point that African-American mosques are not growing in number. There are fewer mosques that are being established. It is a very low percentage of new African-American mosques. And the percentage of all other mosques is growing very quickly and in large size. So therefore, the proportion or the percentage of African-American mosques is declining simply because there are more of other mosques dominated by other ethnic groups. And the fourth point is that, and this is a positive point overall, that so many of our brothers and sisters from overseas are now much more comfortable attending African-American mosques. And again, this is a phenomena that most people notice, that in attendance at African-American mosques, or that were historically African-American, now consist of people from all over. So many of these mosques are no longer classified as African-American. They would be classified as probably other groups. And if you notice that other groups have grown in 2020. Also, the proportion of African-American attendees in all mosques, so this is charting not African-American mosques, but the number of African-Americans that are in attendance to any mosque, but that percentage has also declined. It is now 16%. Again, if you look to the graph, the top 2020, the orange is African-American, 16%. As you can see, the percentage was much higher in other decades. And here, to focus a little bit more on conversions, which have stagnated. So if you look at the graph on the far left, 0 converts, the green is the percentage of mosques that have 0 converts. And you can see that has grown. Now 16% of all mosques have no converts. And then conversely, on the far right, you see mosques that have 50 or more conversions in the year, and that number has decreased. So more mosques have no converts, and there are fewer mosques that are the real drivers of conversion. One footnote of that is that Latino converts continues to climb. If you look at the graph, the top bar, the orange is Hispanic, Latino, Latina, and that is 15%, which has grown from 2000 when it was just 6%. The other quick points of concern are that mosques remain understaffed, right? Almost half of mosques have no full-time paid staff. And this is, again, half full, half empty now. We're talking about half empty now, because the percentage has improved in the hiring of full-time staff. But still, when compared to other houses of worship in America, the fact that almost half of mosques have no paid full-time staff, this is very, very low. And almost all of the mosques that have full-time staff, they are imams typically. Only about 5% of mosques have, let's say, anybody who is full-time focusing on programming, like a youth director. The other aspect of concern is the mosques remain underfunded. Again, glass half empty. The percentage of mosques that have higher budgets has increased. The budget is now up to a little over $300,000, but the glass is half empty because in churches, to get to 300,000, you need an average attendance on Sunday or Sabbath of 180 people. Compared to mosques, we need 410 people to reach an average budget of $3,000. So these are aspects of concern. And I will stop my presentation of that. Hopefully I didn't go too long.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bagby. That was incredibly interesting, and we have a ton of questions. So I'm excited to introduce our panel now. If each of you could get on camera and be ready to respond. We'll start. I'll just introduce the three panelists, and then we'll hear from each of you. First, Azhar Azeez. He is the current treasurer and former president of the Islamic Society of North America. He also serves as the senior vice president of Islamic Relief USA and is on the board of the Islamic Seminary of America. We also have Scott Thumma, who is the director of the Hartford Seminary's Doctor of Ministry program, the Distance Education program, and the Hartford Institute's Church Survey service. And we have Tayyab Yunus. Tayyab is the founder and CEO of Intuitive Solutions. He is also the president of the Center on Muslim Philanthropy and an adjunct faculty at Indiana University's The Fundraising School at Riley Family School of Philanthropy. So to get our conversation started, what I'd love for each of our panelists to do, starting with Brother Azhar, is to tell us what struck them and what really, what were your key takeaways from this study? What do you think are the most important findings that you walked away with?
Thank you so much, Sister Dalia. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I want to begin by applauding the efforts of the author of this report, the chief researcher, Dr. Ihsan Bagby, and I want to recognize the important contributions and support that was given to this effort by ISPU, ISNA, Center for Muslim Philanthropy, and Institute of Religion Research. I'm reminded of this verse from the Holy Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, says in chapter number 9, verse number 18, إِنَّمَا يَعْمُرُ مَسَاجِدَ اللَّهِ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَى الزَّكَاةَ وَلَمْ يَخْشَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ فَأَسَاءَ أُولَٰئِكَ أَن يَكُونُوا مِنَ الْمُهْتَدِينَ. The masajids of Allah shall be maintained only by those who believe in God and the last day, perform their prayers and give charity and fear none but God Almighty. It is they who are on true guidance. I had the good fortune to travel to more than 500 Islamic centers in 43 states. And I'm extremely, extremely excited to see this report. And whenever I share the content of this report in my khutbahs, I see people just being fascinated, because for many number of years, they were in a guessing game. I remember decades back, there were people who were saying we have 6,000 mosques in America. And when you go and ask them what is the basis of their claim, they wouldn't have an answer. I remember one of the pioneers of then MSA of US and Canada, Brother Abdul Mateen Cheetah, who was the founder and owner of Halalco. He migrated over here in 1964 and he joined MSA in 1965. And he told me that at that time they had a campaign where they would collect $10 a month from family, and people would ask them, what would you do with this money? They would say, we will build a masjid. There were many who would support this initiative, but there were many who were also very pessimistic, and they would say, we live in a fast-paced world. And they were saying this when there was no Snapchat, no Instagram, no Twitter, no Facebook, no cell phones. And people said, we live in a fast-paced world. Who's going to come to the masjid? Fast forward 55, 56 years. Today, from this report, we find out that there are 2,769 Islamic centers. So this is something that is phenomenal. As Dr. Ihsan Bagby mentioned in his presentation, we are growing every year, and Muslims are paying attention to data, to comprehensive data, to statistics, and they are contributing in this effort. I also want to share with you that post 9/11, Islamic Society of North America used to have more than 300 Islamic centers who were its affiliates. They used to use the tax ID of ISNA, but the liability was so huge at that time that we had to basically let these 300 Islamic centers establish their own tax IDs. It was a very difficult and it was a very challenging situation, but we had to do this, and today all these Islamic centers have their own tax IDs. I want to remind myself and our audience that masajids, right from the time of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, has played a very important and critical role. It has played the role of a nucleus of our society. When you have a happy occasion in the family, when you have a newborn in the family, when you want to get married, you come to the masjid. When you have a sad occasion in the family, when you have a death in the family, you come to the masjid. When you want to worship God Almighty, and when you want to feel spiritually uplifted, you come to the masjid. So if you look at this report, in last 10 years, the number of mosques has increased by 31%. I'm very happy to see that the Jummah attendance and the Eid prayer attendance has increased by 16%. But what is very disturbing to see is that in the inner city areas, especially around downtown areas, the numbers have decreased. It used to be 17% in 2010, and today it is 6%. And we have to be honest, I very strongly believe that the immigrant community has neglected and did not do its part to support these centers that are in the inner city areas. Their focus was to build and establish the suburban mosque, and they have done a great job in that, but they have not paid due attention to the support of our mosques in the inner city areas. So I just want to once again congratulate the whole team. I want to thank Dr. Ihsan Bagby, and I want to say this, that still we have come a long way, and we still have a long way to go. And I'm reminded of what Muhammad Ali used to say, the late iconic American figure, service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. So let's continue to participate and contribute towards this wonderful effort. With that being said, back to you, Sister Dalia.
Thank you so much, Azhar. Scott, you're a partner on this study, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Certainly, thank you, Dalia.
Key takeaways.
As the person responsible for analyzing the data of the larger faith communities today survey of over 15,000, what Dr. Bagby presents is quite a different picture than the overall picture that survey portrays. And I want to offer some comparison between his study and the overall results. What the comparison shows is sort of what Dr. Bagby said at the beginning. Mosques are significantly different than other congregations, most other congregations in the country. That is, they are in a period of overall growth versus overall decline. They're also significantly younger and more vibrant compared to older and less vibrant. And then the study also points to the fact that they're still in the process of becoming more professionalized and a kind of shifting sense of function, belonging and membership. This is really a very different picture. If you think about the overall religious landscape in the US, the average size of a congregation is about 230, but a median size, half the congregations are below 65 attendees. And their rate of change in the last 5 years is a decline of 7%. And that's compared to mosque, where the Jumu'ah attendees are 410, and the growth rate in 10 years was 16%. So in 5 years, maybe at least 8% increase. So 72% of mosques reported 10% or greater increase in the last 5 years. Only 25% of other congregations in the country reported that kind of growth. And only 11% of mosques expressed any decline, compared to over 50% of mostly Christian congregations that said they were in decline. These findings really stand out. And not only that, most congregations in the country are mostly one race. Only 20%, about 20% of congregations in the country have 20% or more minority attendees. And only 13% are not US born. And of those, only 4% are recent immigrants. So there's obviously some real differences between the two communities. In terms of the younger and vibrant, even if Dr. Bagby's assessment in his article, in his report, was that they're not young enough. In fact, the average percentage of 18 to 35-year-olds, young adults, is 29% in mosques. Overall, in all the congregations in the country, it's only 14%. And likewise, overall, the persons that are 65 or older in most congregations is 33%, while in mosques, it's only 14%. So that youthfulness, in a sense, of the community not only gives it more vibrancy, but also more children, which is also another component of growth, I think, that's very clear here. Finally, I do think that there is an increasing sort of sense of professionalization and a change in a sense from a mosque as a place of prayer to in fact a kind of settledness and a community rootedness, and that might be part of the shift to the suburbs that we're seeing. In some ways, they're starting to parallel more of the functions of Christian congregations. Becoming a member is belonging to this faith community. And you see that by supporting full-time religious leaders, even though still not at the level of most congregations. Congregations across the country, about 3/4 of the religious leader is full-time, and most of them are paid. In a mosque, it's about 50%. And the imams are usually younger. At this point, their average age is 48, but in most congregations, the average age of the religious leader is 57. Dr. Bagby also pointed out the difference in giving. I've worked with some of the fact data lately, and actually the comparison between mosques and other congregations is maybe even a little bit more stark. But I do think that in part, some of that shift in income is explained also by the youthfulness of the congregation. Because when you're younger, you have more children, you don't tend to give quite as much to the religious community. That's true in Christian congregations as well. It's when those children start to leave home and get out of college that then there's more money there. So I think even given some of Dr. Bagby's concerns in his full report, I would say there isn't a Christian denomination that wouldn't trade the situations with the Muslim community, except perhaps related to tender giving. But it paints a great picture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott. That was fascinating. I think the comparison is very interesting, and it does also, it's very consistent with our research on demographics of the American Muslim community, where the average age of the American Muslim community is a full 20 years below the average age of the public at large. So it's reflected in mosque attendance as well. Now, turning to you, Tayyab, what is the major lesson that you've taken away from this report? And can you also tell us a little bit about the upcoming training for mosque leaders that's based on this report?
Thank you, Dalia. Thank you, Azhar, Scott, of course, Dr. Bagby. It's such an honor and a pleasure to work with you on this project. Thank you, ISPU, ISNA. Yeah, so for us at CMP, we're focused on our mission is capacity building. We're trying to solve the capacity problem of the American Muslim social goods sector, and social goods sector including philanthropists, including nonprofit professionals, and including social entrepreneurs. And so when we looked at Dr. Bagby's work, we looked at this report, a couple of things stood out which are informing the training that we're developing now. You know, one of those is, I mean, it boils down to governance, human resources, and financial resources. As Dr. Bagby closed today, one of his last comments was, masjids are understaffed, mosques are understaffed. And so this points to the fact that we've still got a capacity problem. And the other piece that we look at when we look at the report is how the average masjid budget, the average mosque budget is $276,500. You know, $276,500 to run a community center, to do those things Azhar mentioned. Azhar said, when you think about getting married, you go to a masjid. When you think about a funeral, you go to the mosque. When you think about, you know, someone to talk to about parenting, you go to your mosque. And that one center has an average budget of $276,000. We're just not going to get there fast enough. The other piece that really stands out to us is how me personally, you know, as a millennial, is 24% of mosque participation is Gen Z and millennials. And then Pew's research says 49% of the American Muslim community is 18 to 34. So what it means is that our masjids, in terms of strategic planning and strategic direction, they're not lining up their products and services, their programs with where the market's going. So the American Muslim community market this is our biggest demographic, yet our service providers or our mosques are not meeting the need of the market and where the market's going. So at CMP, we call that a governance problem, because governance is about everything from financial viability of the organization to fulfilling its mission successfully. And so this governance part of that, the word governance is a French word, which I won't even try to say in French because I'll butcher it, but it actually means rudder. Rudder is where on a boat? It's on the back of the boat. The rudder looks over the boat to say, where is the boat going to go? Where is it going to land? No matter how difficult the water is. So at the Center on Muslim Philanthropy, we're focused on governance training and workshops. We're focused on human resource workshops and training for our masjids and our mosque leaders, and focus on the fundraising problem. So over the next 6 to 12 months, you should be seeing from the Center on Muslim Philanthropy courses and workshops in partnership with ISNA over the next 12 months for that. Thank you so much. Back over to you, Dalia.
Thank you so much. We are now going to dive into some of these audience questions. And there are so many. I'm going to just try to summarize a few. There are a number of questions related to the decline of African American mosques, and people are, you know, wondering why you think there might be a stagnation in conversion, and if there are, and you've given 4 great reasons for why the number is going down, but the question around conversion is being asked by a number of people. If you Dr. Ihsan can comment on why you think there might be a stagnation in conversion.
I gave a few reasons, but this is something that tugs at my heart very greatly. And my sense is that African-American mosques are not doing the dawah that they used to. They are not involved in their local communities like they used to. They don't have the same presence in their community like they used to. And, you know, I must say part of it is, you know, the passing of Imam Walter Muhammad, may Allah bless his soul, you know, that hurt the community. And the fact that the masjids associated with the Imam Walter Muhammad still have not really come together with what I call historically Sunni African-American mosques. This has to change. African-American mosques need to come together to deal with this issue. They need to stop, you know, the divisions and start focusing on this issue. But it is an issue I think everybody should be involved in, because African-American Muslims have been such a great contributor to the whole experience of Islam in America. And we don't want to lose that. We need a vibrant African-American Muslim community. And so I think that everybody is involved, but I mean, to me, it's the messaging. And who's doing the messaging? Because the African-American community has become older and older because they're not getting the new blood. So that's also a problem, because obviously messaging of an old person like me is different from the messaging of somebody like Tayyab. Tayyab doesn't have too many white hairs anyway. So I think that's some off the cuff, some of my remarks, but I am very intent on trying to organize people to focus on this issue.
Mm-hmm. So there's a point of clarity that a few people have asked just to understand. Is it that the actual number of inner city mosques has decreased, or just their relative proportion to the whole picture, to all mosques? Are they actually closing, or just that other ones are growing?
I didn't calculate that, but the decrease is so significant, I would assume that it's either stagnated, it's the same, but I would guess it's declined slightly. So the percentage, as you said, the number of mosques has increased substantially. The point is that inner city mosques have not increased, and I would guess that they have slightly declined actually in number.
Okay. Okay, great.
Sister Dalia, if I may just quickly add.
Yeah, of course.
You know, the report says that there is a sharp decrease in African-American mosques and attendees. In 2010, African-American mosques were accounted to 23%, whereas in 2020, they are around 13%. Also in Dr. Ihsan's report, in 2010, 17% of mosques that were found in downtown areas has decreased now to 6% in 2020. One of the reasons may be that people are migrating from you know, areas that were around downtown to suburban areas. I work very closely with several masajids here in North Texas area, especially those mosques that are in downtown area. There are 5 to 6 mosques, and I know many of their you know, leadership, they don't live around that area. They live in suburban areas. So this can also be one factor. I also want to respond to Dr. Mohsin's question about the budget of different masajids. The average budget of mosques in 2020 has increased drastically. It is around 276,500 compared to what it was in 2010, which was 167,700. One interesting factor in this report is also that 24% of mosque attendees are in the age group of 18 and 34. So this is very encouraging, and it gives us a lot of hope, especially in an era where people are moving away from their places of worship. We see 24% of the mosque attendees in the age group of 18 and 34. So I thought I just should add this to it.
Thank you. One other question, just around clarification. Are African American, or rather, are African immigrant majority mosques counted in your statistics of African American mosques? How does your answer affect your analysis of the decline of African American mosques?
So in terms of categorizing the various nationalities, ethnicities, Africans are classified as sub-Saharan Africans, and they are separate. The number of their mosque is increasing. They were on the chart listed under other. We have Turkish mosque, we have Bosnian mosque. Those numbers are increasing. Somali mosque, those numbers are increasing, but they were classified under other.
Okay. So questions around, one question here from Victor Beg. What percentage of Muslim American populations are regular members? And is there a disparity between Eid, what is the disparity between Eid attendance versus other times, like, you know, similar to the Christians going to church on Christmas and Easter only?
There's a big difference. Again, I don't have it right in front of me, but basically the difference between Jummah attendance and Eid attendance is a multiple of about 4. So in other words, you know, multiply your Jummah attendance by 4, and that's your Eid attendance. So there is a substantial difference between Jummah and Eid attendance. By the way, looking at Eid attendance, which would be classified as mosque Muslims, at least they come out once a year or twice a year, right? So they would be classified as mosque Muslims, constitute, at least based on the number we have, is about 4 million. 4 million mosque Muslims.
Wow, okay. So another question related now to professionalizing, you know, mosques. So it says, related to the issue of professionalization and staffing, compared to Catholics or mainline Protestants, Muslims do not have an incorporated leadership structure through which to build, manage, grow houses of worship. What can be hypothesized about whether this decentralized structure is an asset or a liability during the 20-year time frame that these reports cover? And I'd love, you know, whoever would like to add to this in addition to Dr. Bagby.
Well, no, let's pass this off to Scott and Tayyab. Maybe Azhar has a lot of experience, inside and outside observer. So,
well, if I can jump in, I would much rather have a decentralized structure. As my presentation said, right, mosques are still growing, and the other group that's growing significantly are non-denominational Christian churches, and those too are not controlled or guided by a larger national structure. I think we live in a time where entrepreneurial and other innovative ways of planting congregations is really much better for growth than an organized, centralized approach.
Okay. Anyone else want to add to that?
I too believe, Sister Dalia, that centralized structure is good in spirit. It sounds very good. It talks about unity, but when it comes to practice, from practical perspective, it is very challenging to manage. And real stuff really cannot be done. if you have one centralized structure. But as long as people has a clear understanding of the issues and are willing to basically collaborate, cooperate, coordinate, and communicate with each other, I think they will be able to make good amount of progress. One question that was raised by Sister Tara in a Q&A box, I wanted to address. This issue of diversity is something that is very critical. If you go to a mosque and if you find only one ethnicity in that mosque, that should really alarm you. If you go to a mosque where women are completely absent, then that raises lots and lots of questions. And if you go to a mosque where young people are not there, I'm using this word very responsibly, young people, because I want to focus on an age group that is 40 and below, because I don't want to use the word youth, but young people, if they are absent from the mosque, that should also alarm you. I personally believe that we have made a good amount of progress in past few years, but still I believe we have a long way to go. We need to make sure that sisters who represent more than half of our population, and if that number is not representing in the boards of the masajids, that is something that is very hurtful. So we need to make extra effort. Maybe if we have to make a constitutional amendment to reserve half of the seats for sisters, we should bring those constitutional amendments and make sure that sisters are in the leadership position, and they have a proven track record, and I believe they will do an amazing job serving our community at large.
If I might add just a quick point, that the study really shows that mosques have no kind of consensus on issues of governance in mosque. And I think that's part of the youth of our mosque. After all, mosques overseas don't have the same issues of how do you govern yourself. We in America, our mosques are actual congregations controlled by the people that attend. At least that's the theory, right? So, and we're all over the place. When you look at governing structure, the report kind of shows that. And this is where Tayyab and others need to, step up and help us understand what are the best practices, what are the models that might guide mosque in terms of governance. And I think, and the question of imams too, the role of imams, the position of imams, again, we're all over the place. And to me, these are some of the most bedeviling questions and issues that Muslims face, because there's a lot of dissatisfaction with how mosques are run. In fact, my studies with you, Dalia, and ISPU, when we went into a particular mosque and did more in-depth study, the greatest dissatisfaction of people was with their leadership. And so this is an issue that needs to go to the front burner to focus on.
Yeah, and I think, the idea that American Muslims or American Muslim mosques need to organize under one umbrella, that idea needs to be abandoned. And we need to switch our mental model from umbrella to platform, and we need to create more platforms. There's no longer one public, but rather multiple publics. And within the business framework, we actually talk more about special interest groups. And we can't think about the American Muslim community, whether across 5 or 10 or 100 zip codes, to have the same preferences, beliefs, and practices anymore, but rather there is special interest groups, and how do we actually engage with these special interest groups? American Muslims are just as American as apple pie now, and America is different across regions. I was born and raised in the panhandle of Florida, 10 miles off of the Alabama state line. How I see myself as an American Muslim is much different than my buddy living in Texas, right? Where everything is bigger. And my friends in Southern California, or in the Midwest, or in the Northeast. And so we as American Muslim leaders, we have to focus more in understanding the 5 or 6 zip codes around our masjid, leverage each other, thinking of each other as platforms, and even national organizations like ISNA, like ICNA, like CMP, we have to think of ourselves as platforms. How do we resource? How do we support the work in the communities? And once we do that, and how do we help special interest groups? Once we do that, we'll actually have higher engagement, inshallah.
So that's a great segue into what I'd love to close with, which is really visioning, looking forward. There were two great questions. One asked if there were examples of churches that were able to retain their young people as they matured professionally. And then another question that asked, what does the ideal mosque look like in terms of services, programs, staff, community involvement in the next 10 years? So looking forward, I'd love to hear where you see the mosque going ideally. And we can start with you, Dr. Bagby.
So we have already gained momentum, but now we face many issues that are the same issues that are facing churches, and that is a new generation, well, let's say an aging generation in the congregation, which is true. In fact, we are starting to transition from kind of the pioneering generation, the founding generation of so many, the vast majority of mosques, and a new generation, a younger generation that are going to take over, right? And any sociologist would tell you this is when an organization is most vulnerable to change, to decline, when you have generational change. So we have a lot of momentum, but we have deep challenges for the future. And I must say, not Scott, but so many sociologists will tell me, oh, y'all just wait. You know, yeah, you're doing fine now, right? You're a young community, right? But just wait. Wait a few decades. You know, wait to see if your third generation still continue to go to the mosque. So we have a lot of challenges. I think we should be positive. I think we're going to continue to grow, but we have deep challenges. One of them is the young adults, and one of them is conversion, right? And governance issues. You know, how to make our mosque, you know, function better. Because if anything, this turns off the young adults and women when they see infighting. And when they see, you know, khutbahs that are irrelevant to what's going on in the world. So another big challenge is homegrown imams that are trained, but come from the soil of America, who've experienced the American Muslim environment. And if we don't train these, you know, a new generation of imams and Muslim leaders, again, we're going to be in trouble.
Well, thank you all so much. Your feedback is incredibly important, as well as your attendance. And we're going to just end with taking a very short poll that just popped up. We encourage you to share this report with your networks and look out for the recording of this webinar to also share online and through email. Thank you and have a wonderful weekend.